Hello, and welcome to video 2 of this series on teaching historical concepts. Today, the focus is on evidence. If you haven't watched video 1 on historical inquiry, please do watch it before, as this one directly builds on it. You can do that by clicking on the link in the top right hand corner. We'll be focusing on the same 3 questions as before, with the aim of having a deeper understanding of evidence and thinking about the role it plays in the primary history classroom. This video series acts as an introduction to a much deeper and more detailed conversation. What is evidence? You may have heard the term source of evidence before and thought it was a single concept in history. There is huge overlap, but they are slightly different when we think about the nuanced details. A source is a fragment of the past that remains today in many different forms. More on that later. They can contain evidence that is relevant to us, but this depends upon the inquiry questions we are posing. The relationship between questions into knowledge from video 1 is front and centre once again. Evidence is what is extracted from the source and then used by historians to construct their accounts, interpretations and arguments. History has the word story in it for a reason. When we think about what a history unit contains, the 4 aspects introduced in video 1 are ever present. As is evidence, because without relevant evidence we don't have a sense of narrative arc, setting, character and both the relevant foreground and background knowledge. Evidence is what shapes our knowledge of these. It is important to remember that there are differences between the historical units taught and a fictional story. The first being that we rarely, if ever, teach the full narrative. The next is explored a little later in this video. What are the different types of source material we take evidence from? You may have encountered the concept of a primary and a secondary source, but there has been quite a lot of confusion over what this actually means. A primary source has a direct connection to the historical period, event or person in question, whereas a secondary source is a subsequent interpretation. This means that the person constructing that subsequent interpretation has looked at a range of materials and adds a layer of interpretation before coming to their own analysis, account or arguments. Some secondary schools and some primary schools are now choosing to call primary sources historical sources and secondary sources interpretations to make it a bit clearer in terms of that connection. What really matters is consistency and accuracy when we're using these terms. On the screen, you can see an assortment of different types of source material we may draw upon in different units. There is no singular list of which evidence is inherently more valuable. As I said before, it's entirely dependent upon the inquiry question, which is dictating which knowledge matters to us. What do they offer? Relics of the past are the literal remains of history. It may be individual items such as coins, pottery, the literal remains of people, or enormous sites preserved in various states of repair or disrepair. Records offer something different, a literal commentary or perspective from someone's lived experience. Think about well-known examples like Pepys's Diary of the Great Fire of London, or the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle documenting the Anglo-Saxon perspective of early medieval England. Are the two the same? No, not even close. Are they comparable? We use them in conjunction with one another in order to build a picture of the past. That is represented in the national curriculum for Key Stage 1 and 2. Combining sources of evidence. Is there a best source of evidence? It depends upon the inquiry question, but it isn't a case of one source equals the answer. Is there a singular way in which to use source material? Once again, it depends upon the inquiry question. What we take from sources of evidence is dependent upon the questions we ask of them. How, therefore, does it interact with the inquiry process? We study source material in order to gain the knowledge. The what of the curriculum is based upon what the sources of evidence reveal. The how of the curriculum is how we use source material to study the past. It is important to remember that we must use a range of source material. The 2023 Ofsted subject report said, and I quote, "Much of what pupils learned about sources focused on archaeological evidence or on artefacts. In some schools, teachers used artefacts very well to help pupils learn about the material culture of past societies. However, many pupils whom we spoke to had developed misconceptions about historians. They conflated them with archaeologists or thought they were simple fact checkers." End quote. So on that previous slide when I showed you the huge breadth of source material we may draw upon, that's something to reflect and ensure is happening in every unit so far as is possible. Historical source material and source of evidence are the blocks upon which historical knowledge are built. They are what claims, accounts and arguments are based upon. And the second part that I said I'd come back to, we do not have a complete picture, and that knowledge is always open up to debate and review. That's a core part of teaching history. So moving into the classroom, how could it look in Key Stage 1 classrooms? The two sentences you can see on the screen are from the National Curriculum Subject Content for Key Stage 1. Let's unpick them. They should ask and answer questions, choosing and using parts of stories and other sources to show that they know and understand the key features of events. So in Key Stage 1, we are going to be using fictional stories, but also other source material. It's not about just a regurgitation of what the child knows. It's really important that they look at it and go, these parts help me answer the question I've been asked. They should understand some of the ways in which we find out about the past and identify different ways which it is represented. That might be the difference between an object and the story. It might be Pepys's diary in a piece of archaeology. It's important that the what and the how are taught alongside one another. Moving into Key Stage 2, we get a much more formalised approach. They should regularly address and sometimes devise historically valid questions about change, cause, similarity, difference and significance. Questions are key to teaching history and should be a part of every lesson. They should construct informed responses that involve the thoughtful selection and organisation of relevant historical information. Therefore, it's not a case of just going, this source presents this, therefore that's the answer. It's that building that picture as I mentioned before. Understand how our knowledge of the past is constructed from a range of sources. The range is key. It isn't like a reading comprehension. It isn't the answer in this source, it's this offers me this evidence. How does that complement or contradict what I already know or think? A quick summary. Sources and evidence are the building blocks of historical knowledge. The use of source material should be a feature of pretty much every history lesson. There is a huge range of source material out there that we must curate and combine to build as clear a picture as is possible. Sources and evidence is what drives the analysis and interpretations of historians and also in our classrooms. They must be combined with specific inquiry questions or sub-questions to the overall inquiry in order to be rooted in the historical discipline. So where next? Which concepts are we stressing in overall inquiry questions and sub-questions? That will be the remainder of this video series. I hope you found this one useful. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.